Everyone. Patrick and I are back. Hi there, Patrick.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
Nice
All
to see
right,
you.
there we are. There we are. At first, I didn't have your um, camera up on the screen, but you see how fast I'm learning now. I'm getting better and better with the restream. So you're in good health. Everything's looking up. Mercury's direct.
Right.
My dad's
Uh,
my dad's out of the hospital. You're not sick. Your family's not sick.
right. Um,
or
yeah,
or
it's yeah. We're doing well. Um, I was looking at one of the past restreams and looking at the comments, and someone had said that I needed to let you complete your thoughts and let you speak. So
I saw that
apparently,
remark.
it's possible to out a fellow Leo rising.
Uh, you know,
So
I'm not.
I'll keep that in mind today.
I'm an old graybeard now. I'm not as pushy as I was in my youth. I'm not after some sort of golden fleece or whatever the hell I was chasing, whatever the hell it is young men chase. Yeah, so things are totally looking up. I've had a busy week. I've just been doing a lot of research, finally catching up on Mr. DT in with my database and sort of going through his life because I feel we need to be ready for the next stage. And I managed to get through his last presidency without paying too much astrological attention, apart from what I saw on the news every day. I wasn't making a file on him at the time. I find that hard to do while the news is happening. But yeah, I've been catching up on my study on him and learning a lot of really interesting things. And aside from that, I'm learning how to make videos using AI because I have a lot of astrology videos I want to make. And there's some facets of AI that would work really well with what I'm trying to do. I made that Venus Synodic cycle video without AI, which is a miracle enough, but it took me a really long time to make something that simple. And I have so many of these videos that I want to make. So in fact, I think AI ultimately could really help me not just make them look nicer, but make them faster, produce them.
We'll have to compare notes about that maybe later. That I it'd be really interesting to know exactly how one does that. There's a lot of AI stuff I'm trying to kind of
Right.
figure out, and with mixed results. The main thing that's been going on for me this past week with Mercury stationing direct in my 10th is just continuing to sort of doing all the sort of behind the scenes work of fixing my inbox and sort of looking at all my sort of business procedures and trying to straighten things out and create kind of a plan
Mm,
for the future and for my various projects. But the other kind of really big thing that happened this week for me and my family was that, and this doesn't sound that important in the grand scheme of things, but um, my kids were really obsessed with, they were really excited about the fact that they were going to be performing in their first like dance recital. This is like the reason why this is kind of a big deal for them is because um because they're schooled at home and because of the pandemic, they have not really had any kind of external thing for a very, very long time. So for the
mm.
past few months, they were like in dance classes, in masks and everything. And they were preparing for this performance. So this performance finally happened yesterday, but just the whole week leading up to this is just the biggest thing that sort of happened in their lives. And I
Fun.
I wasn't really thinking about the astrology of it at all because I was just thinking of it in terms like, oh, I got to get them to this place in time. But I finally did just today, and I thought it was actually really impressive. I'm a little ashamed to admit that I had not sort of seen this sort of coming. Uh, and even though I knew that my daughter's Jupiter return was like right around now, I somehow didn't
Mm,
make the connection that
right.
the Jupiter return would actually be happening like basically on the day of this dance recital. And
Oh,
I
how fun.
remember, so I actually have the charts if we want to take a look at them. They're quasi anonymized, to protect their privacy, but I got the go ahead from my wife to be able to show the charts if you'll indulge me. I think it's actually kind of impressive. So I'm going to share my screen now. So let me make sure I got this right. Okay. So this is, I don't know, just kind of hilarious to me, but all right, here we go. Tie screen. Okay. So you should be able to see my screen now.
Now we can.
Okay, excellent. So this is my eldest child's chart, and on the outer wheel is, I need to switch it. There we go. So this is my eldest child's chart on the inner wheel, and on the outer wheel is the exact time this performance began. And so you'll notice that she has Sagittarius rising with Jupiter in Taurus at 0 degrees of Taurus, and you can see Jupiter was currently at that point yesterday at 0 degrees of Taurus. Now I've been looking at this for quite a while because I was sort of wondering what the return of the ascendant ruler to itself would be about, and how that would manifest. And one of the typical things that I sort of see with Jupiter returns, especially the first one, is that it's a time when people sort of come maybe into first contact with the thing that sort of expands or opens their world, and the thing
Right.
that sort of interests them, and the things they want to do. And it's so funny because right around the time of the Jupiter return, almost even closer to the degree, very recently in the past couple of days, my wife and I have been discussing, we found out about this arts academy that exists in really close to us, and that she's at the exact age she would need to be to potentially go to this like arts magnet school
Oh,
that would give her
fantastic.
the option of being able to like focus on dance or theater
Mm.
or voice or something along those lines. And she's more artsy. And so just in the past couple of days, she said, like, I want to go into the theater program.
Mm.
And then she does like her first big performance right on this date.
Right. Right.
And I mean, and it was such a huge, I mean, remember, this is a child who since the beginning of 2020 hasn't even really been able to go anywhere.
Yeah.
Finally having a world sort of open up,
No, I
and
know.
at
I
the end of
know.
the performance, like, the other kids are sort of happy about it, but she's like in tears. Like, she said,
Mm.
and we said, "What's wrong, Lucy?" And she said, I'm I'm just so happy,
Oh,
to be
sweet.
done. But I just thought
Sweet.
that was like
Yep.
kind of an amazing sort of Jupiter return for her, where she sort of comes to the end of this process, preparing for this performance, and realizing this is sort of a direction she wants to sort of continue to go in. Now I don't know, we have some other things to sort of figure out to make sure to see if that's actually gonna sort of work out. But you also notice the moon was right on her
Yeah.
sun at the time of
Yeah, I
this
noticed
performance as
that as
well.
well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
and so she's just about 12, huh? So she's,
yeah, just
yeah.
about 12. So this is really very close to, yeah, I mean, within less than a degree of her exact Jupiter return.
Yeah.
But now here's where things get really, really funny. So with my second child, my son, um, he has 29 degrees Taurus rising. And
Right.
so that new moon that occurred um at like 29 degrees of
Right.
Taurus happened right in his ascendant. You'll notice that he has Venus retrograde in Capricorn, which is opposite Jupiter, and you see
Mhm.
Venus is conjunct as Jupiter. Now, the reason why
Opposite
this
is
was
Venus retrograde.
yeah, exactly. All right, now here's the funniest part though. He's a boy, right? So there's like 150 kids in this dance recital. He is the only boy.
Yeah,
He's like
that's
everyone else is in like, these tutus and dresses. He's the one in a tux. He's the
how
standout.
funny, how funny.
He is the very unusual, out of place
Right. Yeah.
character in this whole ensemble, and he's the one who has,
Oh,
this
adorable, adorable.
new moon that happens on his ascendant, and of course he was extremely chuffed to bits. This is, something that he said in, like, the day before or so when we first put his costume on. He's like, I feel so handsome. you know and he was he's absolutely adorable. And my wife even actually shared a photo on Twitter
Okay.
of them in the costume. So that I thought was so funny that this new moon happened right on his ascendant. He has the sun right on his ascendant, and this Venus thing, as he sort of is this kind of standout,
Yeah.
kid. He's even in a 10th house perfection, for what it's worth, with the Pluto applying towards his sun. There's a few different things I suppose that could mean, but I just thought that was so amazing. There's such a confirmation of that ascendant degree being at 29 Taurus, not 0 Gemini.
Yeah.
And that's sort of confirmed by the youngest child, my daughter. So she has her moon at 28 degrees of Taurus. So she of course had uh, that same new moon occur right on the degree of
Right.
her
Yeah.
moon. And
Yeah.
now, uh, I must say, this was a much less pleasant experience for my youngest child, because um, it was a very, very long day. It was very, very stressful for her. She, because we haven't really been away from her for very long, when we had to leave her alone with the adults backstage, who are handling all of the kids, she had a very intense feeling of
Abandonment.
abandonment.
Yeah.
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 And you can see, like, she had like Saturn, Neptune
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
her. I mean,
Opposite her Mars, Jupiter there. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, this was, she did not experience this very, very well. She was very, very hungry. Like, one of the adults was able to sort of give her some crackers. It was a long time between the time we were able to get her versus when she performed. So she didn't have quite as good of a time. I mean, she was also adorable as a button, but she you can
Yeah.
really tell the difference between my
For
son's
sure.
experience of it, but the new moon on his ascendant versus my youngest, who had this more uh bad experience. But anyways, I just thought that was really
Yeah.
funny,
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you
to
for
sort of
sharing
see
that.
that astrology kind of in action. So
Yeah.
I'll
Well,
stop talking now.
no, I find it interesting. I mean, of course, like your oldest daughter is just a couple of months younger than my daughter,
Mhm.
and I also know a friend of mine has a young daughter who I've known all her life, back in South Africa, who's maybe 2 3 weeks younger than your youngest daughter. So those charts sort of look kind of familiar to me, but the
Mhm.
differences are also really interesting. And it reminds you how you get these sort of little micro generations, even within a sort of set decade,
Right.
the ones who have Jupiter in Taurus versus the ones who have Jupiter in Aries.
So
Uh,
your daughter has Jupiter in Aries rather than Jupiter in
exactly,
Taurus.
exactly. And you can really see if you get to know like the kids in the class, like I've known a number of them, most of their lives. And so you can really see the difference between them, the way it sort of
Mhm.
divides the. Yeah, and the last mine is a, Aries Sun, Jupiter Aries, Uranus Aries,
S
Mercury Aries. So like yeah, she butts heads with the Taurus gangs, although she's
so I
got some
would
close
wonder
buddies there.
then, so what was your daughter's experience of her Jupiter return?
Yeah, it's I think it's got a lot to do with skateboarding. And I mean that's the new thing. She's into making videos. I sort of taught her how to do that on her iPad, how to use the camera, how to use editing things. Um, yeah, and just reading. She's becoming more sophisticated. I can tell in the manga that she
Yeah,
wants to read. She's it's not just the kid stuff anymore. Yeah, she's becoming a little
right.
grown up.
I know for myself that my Jupiter return, well, because I have Jupiter in Aries as well, so I recently had my Jupiter return, and my most recent Jupiter return seems to have coincided with all of my, like, activities surrounding becoming sort of professionally certified as an astrologer, learning how to calculate charts by hand. Um, doing all of that sort of preparation and sort of getting confirmation, I guess, from, you know, international astrology bodies, very Jupiter in the ninth, of
Sure.
myself. My very first Jupiter return, though, coincided with the time when I basically started playing piano by myself, because I had learned earlier around 5 or 6, but I had to discontinue lessons because I don't know, I just was interested in other things, and then I sort of put on to violin and other things. But I eventually sort of came back to piano right around 11 to 12, playing
Mm.
Beatles songs. And the other sort of timed event that I have for when I was 11, just about to turn 12, was that I was confirmed. Went through my confirmation with the Catholic Church, which is really funny in hindsight because of how much I,
How that worked
really,
out. How that,
yeah,
yeah.
But I remember at the time, and it's really funny too because I was considered like the star pupil as well of
Of
the
course you were.
confirmation course. Um, but
Even I
for
consider
me,
you the star pupil.
for me, it was what I kind of got out of Catholicism, though, was it was my first introduction to sort of bigger questions and the broader world, because that led to then asking sort of questions like, oh, well, what does happen after death, and what is kind of the meaning of all this. So it was kind of my introduction to this sort of bigger philosophical questions. Eventually, I just found that the answers that they provided, were adorable.
See, my questions are always,
Quaint.
what do all those foot pedals on the organ do? That's what I
See,
always
well,
wonder.
that's more interesting actually than the magisterium of the
Yeah,
Catholic Church.
yeah, I'm
Um,
that's the thing that
and the
always has
music
me.
was the big thing for me
Oh,
too,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
right?
You can never take that away from any of the religions is the music they've contributed. Um, yeah, no, funny enough, my first Jupiter return also involved a stage performance. I had the role of Fagin in the musical Oliver, which, if you know the musical, it's even you get more solo songs than the main role.
Got to pick a
uh,
pocket or two.
yes,
Whoa, got to
exactly.
pick
Yeah,
a
yeah,
pocket or two.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There was that, and yeah. So that was kind of a big deal. It was kind of like, I don't know, Ralph Wiggum playing was it George Washington in The Simpsons when it was kind of like one of those moments. Ralph Wiggum gets his moment in the
How
spotlight.
Jupiter in the second of you, though,
Yeah,
to
yeah.
play someone like Fagin, a pickpocket master.
Right, 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 right. Yeah, no, no, it was a really good production. It was an art school and everything, and so it was kind of a big deal. And yeah, since I mean, the very last Jupiter return was when I was falling in love with my wife and traveling around with her and sort of acting like a teenager. So
Mhm.
yeah, they can be pretty sweet, those Jupiter returns.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of what happened to my Jupiter return in 2011 or 2010. When was Jupiter in late Aries in 2011?
It was 2010, 2011. Yeah.
2010, 2011.
It
I
went
mean,
through Aries really
oh,
quickly
oh,
in
right. Yeah,
2011.
of course. Yes, I remember now. Well, I graduated from college like within days of my Jupiter return in the ninth house. So there you go. But on the actual pass to the degree in minutes, that happened during my final performance with my college a cappella group, which was sort of that's what I felt like what my real graduation ceremony was, because that was such a huge part of my college experience. It was kind of like, I guess it sort of served the function of like a fraternity, I guess, because it was like my um
It was your
the
gang.
singers,
It
he
was
was
your
my gang. Yeah, they
it
were
was
like
your
my,
crew. Yeah.
yeah, my brothers and sisters.
Your
And
barking mad brothers and sisters.
right. And so when that's so my sort of farewell performance was it happened at the exact time of the passage was during that performance. And so I thought that was I kind of understood the gravity of that moment. Like, okay, yeah, this really is the end of that era. And then of course, very shortly after that too, I then moved from Massachusetts to Arizona. So there was this big voyage, this trip
Mm.
that took place after that time. So those ninth house themes and Jupiter themes for me were always really strong, I guess, with each return. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that
yeah.
makes sense. That makes sense. Well, it's true. I mean, Jupiter is in Taurus again.
So what
So
was so what happened for you at 24 then, or 23?
24, that Jupiter return was an amazing trip to Europe. Um, yeah, where I just sort of gallivanted around Europe and went to rock festivals and
Because it would have been a Venus Jupiter one for you as
yeah,
well. Like that
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
particular one is always going to be
I was just
especially sweet.
I was just hopping on and off of trains, going to rock festivals, you know, um, seeing the Ramones, the Pogues, Sonic Youth, Dinosaur Jr. And at 11 in the morning, this unknown opening act 3-piece outfit called Nirvana, totally, you know, just the show opener, totally unknown at the time. So yeah, good times, just gallivanting around Europe. Good times. I'm reflecting on Jupiter being in Taurus now, and I thought I would
Mhm.
just sort of go back and have a look at some other Jupiter ingresses into Taurus and see if anything interesting doesn't come up. Because yeah, you're reminding me Jupiter and Aries going into Taurus. I mean, this is the Jupiter return of um, you know, the whole Occupy Wall Street thing.
Uh, right. Was that Jupiter and Taurus?
I'm pretty
I
sure it
think
was.
like I think it was September of 2011.
Yeah, yeah. So if your daughter's born in June of 2011, she's got Jupiter and Taurus, obviously by September of
Oh, right.
2011. Yeah.
Dur. Yeah,
Dirt.
you're right. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Right.
That's true. Although Jupiter would have stationed retrograde in
Yeah, but
September-ish.
not until September, so it wouldn't
Okay,
be.
yeah, so would have still gone forward. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah, you're
was.
right.
You can see here it was in Taurus right up until May of 2012.
Yeah, that's funny too, because you think of the sign of Taurus, and you think of how, like, well, literally, there's a giant statue of a bull outside, the
Yeah,
World
that's right. That
Financial
I remember that
Center,
being the
and
thing. Yeah.
they refer to upswings in the market as bull markets. So
Yeah.
this sort of Taurian imagery and Taurian keywords that sort of loosely describe the idea of the nation's sort of financial security. So
Indeed.
with
Indeed.
Jupiter coming into Taurus, one would typically think, oh, that means like good things occurring for this. This would seem to guarantee some level of economic expansion, but I don't know. This is also square Pluto and square Mars. There's a lot of discussion about the debt ceiling debate, which I think also took place in 2011
Yeah.
into 2012.
Yeah.
And I've been reading recently that Janet Yellen, former Fed chair, now current U.S.
Yeah.
Treasurer, has basically been saying that even if the U.S. debt ceiling is raised, that we're still basically screwed. I've been reading that China is trying to collect on its debts that it holds with other countries. So this is like a really bad thing if this starts
Huh.
happening with the United States. It just seems like we are kind of headed towards um, a much more sort of perilous type of situation with Pluto opposite Mars, square
Right.
Jupiter and Taurus. So um,
Right.
Uh, I'm not sure. I've been looking at that Mars Jupiter Pluto T square and trying to figure out what that actually means, because that's sort of one of the main things that are going on right now. Um, I wonder if you have any thoughts on that.
On sorry, which?
On the current Mars
Yeah.
Pluto Jupiter T square.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I had something up a second ago that I was going to speak to that's kind of relating to that. when I was looking for Jupiter at Taurus. Bear with me. Okay, I had it up a second ago and then I stupidly closed it when I was trying to share. Okay, it's going much slower than usual.
Taurus isn't exactly a sign.
Yeah, right.
I'm
still in my Jupiter and Aries mode here. Okay, so here we are. I was looking at this. Better yet, I'll open the chart. Here we are. This was the beginning of the Occupy Wall Street protest. And I noticed that this is, of course, when it's just sort of starting up, and you notice Mars is at 29 Cancer, but it's kind of mirroring the where this square would be going.
Right.
And Jupiter has only just gone retrograde not long before, 18 days earlier, and it would, I wish this thing would get out of the way. And when it goes direct, it'll be at 0 Taurus as well. So it's headed for that path that kind of resembles now. And this was, of course, the day of the Pluto station. So yeah, I mean, considering where things are going, it wouldn't surprise me if we see mass action in the streets of Wall Street or something like it.
Right.
Soon enough.
Wow. Yeah, I kind of understood the Occupy Wall Street phenomenon through the lens of like Uranus square Pluto.
Yeah.
But that's quite interesting. Mars Jupiter events, I think there's a really long period of recurrence between Mars Jupiter squares or conjunctions or oppositions where like they return very close to the same date. I'm trying to remember what it is. It's like 150 something years.
Oh yeah.
Let's see if I can figure out.
I can put that up, I think. Squares, conjunctions, and oppositions?
Like so 190 190 years you get really close Mars Jupiter recurrences almost on the same date.
I see.
What the reason why I found this out is because I noticed on the day that Osama bin Laden was killed, that was at a Mars Jupiter conjunction in Aries. And the last time there was a Mars Jupiter conjunction Aries really close to that degree was 190 years earlier, which was which just happens to be May 5th, 1821, which was when
the day Napoleon died.
Yeah. So you kind of have these two events that occurred at Mars Jupiter conjunctions almost close to the same degree in the sign of Aries, where you see the death of a kind of reviled figure, or a sort of military victory in a sense over someone who was a problem.
Right
In a sense.
And there is a sense like they eventually did a toxicology analysis of Napoleon, and it does look like he indeed might have been poisoned.
Right.
He was out there on the island in the Atlantic there, whatever it's called, St. Helena. Yeah, here, I'll put up the bi-wheel here. I have it up. Right here. Okay. So yeah, you can see Napoleon's chart on the inner wheel. I don't. This is the outer wheel. I don't have the chart for the killing of Osama bin Laden, although I do
But
have
you do have that same,
Yeah,
same
exactly.
time frame.
Yeah, yeah.
That yeah.
That's really funny. I put this one up as a stopgap. I do have Mark Bowden's book about the killing of Osama bin Laden. I've been meaning to make a chart of it, but I just don't have it up. So I used the next best thing, which is, of course, just before Osama bin Laden was killed, Barack Obama really stuck it to Donald Trump at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. So that's the chart I chose there. But you can still see that's really, really interesting. The Mars Jupiter squares,
Or conjunctions.
conjunctions rather. What am I saying? Yeah, these very concentrated stelliums in Aries with the Sun in Taurus. Fascinating.
Yeah. So,
Fascinating.
so in theory, then May of 1833 could hold answers for the current Mars Jupiter square, although it
Okay.
happened in slightly different signs. It slightly removed, I guess. It wasn't quite as exact as I thought.
Well, you're
So
you're the
May of 18,
you're the classical music guy. We could get another Brahms was born in May of 1833. I'm sure you'd like that.
I mean,
Are you are
Brahms
you
is really nice. Yeah, he's kind of a neoclassical kind of guy. He's got some nice pieces.
there you
He's
are.
kind of like I mean, I'm probably totally wrong for saying this, but I feel like he's kind of the John Williams of his time in some ways, because I guess you could also say John Williams is sort of like the neoclassicist of our time that is sort of
Right.
beloved,
Right.
appreciated.
Yeah, I think of him as this guy
Because
sort
he's
of
kind of old. Because in a way, Brahms was sort of old fashioned for his time. He was kind of resurrecting these sort of earlier styles. He wasn't like
I think of
an
him as
innovator
I
necessarily.
think of him as the anti-Hitler because he's the German who went to live in Austria as opposed like to the Austrian that goes to live in Germany, and like, but that speaks to what you're talking about. Like the reason he's drawn to Vienna and all that is like some of that sort of old school vibe.
Right. I like the I guess his sort of take on Romani music. I think some of
Ooh.
that's kind of interesting. Um, but
Very, very forward thinking of him.
well, but I don't know that many people would describe him as forward thinking.
Well,
Because he
no,
was such
but in
a
that no, I
in
mean
other
I
ways
get you
a
because he's a
traditionalist.
classicist, but I just
Yeah.
he's thinking ahead to Django Reinhardt and maybe what jazz will do in the 20th century with the introduction, with the Romani music.
Right.
Well,
That's a lot.
we go off on some tangents here.
1833. So 1833, with regard to, and yeah, unfortunately, it doesn't happen in the same signs. It's in Jupiter and Aries, square Mars and Cancer at that time.
Okay.
But yeah, for I guess the closest analog we have then to the current Mars Jupiter era is the Zuccotti Park
Yeah.
protest sort of heating up in that time. The opposition to Pluto, though, pardon me. One of the things I think is kind of interesting that's happened with Jupiter ingressing into Taurus is that, we recently had these congressional hearings about AI. And in fact, doesn't Sam Altman have his son at Zero Taurus?
Yeah.
So he was
He's
called forth to testify in front of Congress when Jupiter was on his sun, and that was happening square that Pluto in Aquarius, which is square his natal sun Pluto opposition. I think you have those charts, right,
I
Nick?
do. Yeah. I've got
And I've been reading. I didn't see the testimony, but I guess some people were criticizing the kind of very fawning and
yeah.
praising or laudatory tone of a lot of the lawmakers who were kind of groveling at this guy's feet instead of like
Yeah.
having a more having a
Sticking
tone and posture of accountability.
yeah, instead of sticking it to him. Yeah, so this is Sam Altman's untimed chart. So I don't have angles on this. I just have the sun sign in the first house position. But indeed, he's got this Sun Pluto opposition. And yeah, that Jupiter Mars square really sort of locks into this chart with the Pluto in Aquarius, the Mars in Leo, and then Jupiter transiting his Sun. And yeah, you're right. They were sort of softballing it the whole time, weren't they?
And well, I also read that he had given that some of the lawmakers had a dinner with him
Right.
the
Yeah.
previous
Yeah. Yeah.
night
Yeah.
or dinner before or so. And so I just thought it was kind of interesting, like, this guy who, from by all appearances, isn't necessarily, I don't know, wouldn't give off the impression of being this incredibly charismatic and sort of powerful person, but he just through his own kind of, you know, uh, dogged, I guess, determination of pursuing this technology, and even with these kind of sort of high pressure sort of situations and big power players like Elon Musk, he's kind of muscled his way into having this sort of dominant position in this emerging field
Yeah.
that has even put Microsoft and Google on the back heels,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and apparently has lawmakers kind of wrapped around his finger and laying at his feet. And it's kind of like, okay, talk about a Sun Pluto guy. I gotta say, if you bring up that chart again, of Sam Altman, uh one of the charts that this really reminds me of is Mark Zuckerberg, who was
Yeah.
also
I
born
was just thinking Zuckerberg.
close to a solar eclipse in Taurus with the sun
Yeah,
in Taurus,
he's a year older than this.
and
Um,
also born with Mars, Saturn, and Pluto configured. Because if you see Zuckerberg's chart, he was born with Mars, Saturn, and Pluto in Scorpio, but Sam Altman is born with the opposite, with Mars in Taurus, opposite Saturn and Pluto. So, there's
oh,
they have some interestingly
I don't understand why I don't have them.
challenging planets in similar sorts of configurations. Uh, and they're obviously both people who are at the head of two um the kind of leaders of these two tech movements that have been utterly transformative for society, Sam Altman with AI and Mark Zuckerberg with social media.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of an interesting parallel.
Totally. I was sure I had Mark Zuckerberg in my database there, but I couldn't find him. Yeah, he's May 14th, 84. Put up the buy wheel there. Right, bear with me. And yeah, okay. There we are. So yeah.
Okay. Something tells me these guys might not get along. Too similar, maybe.
Yeah, it's funny, huh? It's funny. I mean, some big differences, but some
Yeah.
fundamental similarities. Um, yeah, I mean, but the funny thing about Sam Altman is he's also got this sort of robotic vibe to him, doesn't he?
A little
Uh,
bit.
like Zuckerberg. I mean, they always make those jokes about Zuckerberg, not being quite humanoid. There's some of that with this guy as well. Yeah, well, the kind of speaks for itself. It's very interesting differences between the two, but yeah, they both have that Pluto and Scorpio. It's a little
Right.
tighter for Altman, but it's still still a fact.
Well, I always thought it was kind of interesting for Mark Zuckerberg that he was born with Mercury so close to the opposition with Pluto. Even if it's out of sign, it's still really
Oh
close
yeah, yeah,
geometrically. And, he's someone who has, when Facebook finally got too big, he's come under fire for privacy violations and the
Right.
use of people's data for kind of nefarious means. Even the inceptional chart for Google.com has Mercury square Pluto, which is
Right.
often accused of similar kinds of intrusions or violations of people's private information and holding too much power with respect to the information that they have.
Yeah.
And these are some of the I think these are some of the similarities you could probably draw with like Sun Pluto oppositions. The Federal Reserve was started at a Sun Pluto opposition across Cancer and Capricorn.
That's right. Yeah.
This is a small body of just a few people who have an outsized impact and power and influence over, the global economy. And in a similar way, Sam Altman is the head of this very exclusive group of people who have such a huge potential influence on this extremely powerful emerging technology that is poised to disrupt the world anew in a similar or maybe even more fundamental way than the emergence of the internet did.
Yeah, for sure. This is the chart for the Federal Reserve Act, and this is what you were talking about, the Sun in Capricorn
Right.
being opposite Pluto there.
Another kind of example of that too is the ratification of the Constitution, which enshrines, things like the Electoral College that has Mercury Pluto conjunct in Aquarius. And again, you're dealing with a very small group of people, the Electoral College, who make decisions that could potentially override the democratic popular will.
This
So
is the signing of the Constitution. Is this the one you mean?
oh no, I think it's I think it's the ratification of
By
basically what you if you
after
look
the by the
yeah, it's
states.
like yeah, like Mercury is
Right.
conjunct
I have Delaware,
Pluto.
Georgia, Massachusetts. I remember New York and Virginia are like two of the last. There's Virginia, New Hampshire. There's Virginia, sorry. Ratifies the Constitution. New York. I remember New York being the only one where the Constitution was ratified with Uranus and Leo as opposed to Cancer. All the other states ratified it because I remember New York's like one of the biggest. This is what I remember about all that. One of the biggest states, but they don't ratify until the very end. July
Oh, I'm not
26,
sure what
1788. Uranus and Leo.
I'm not sure what I was talking about. I remember just looking up like when the Electoral College was sort of established, or maybe it was like the first time it convened. I
Right.
forget exactly, but it was some Mercury Pluto signature that I just thought, okay, that's actually quite appropriate.
Okay.
I mean, even without that example, there are still a lot of ways you can see how Mercury or Sun configurations with Pluto tend to
Yeah.
imbue someone with this sort of the extreme possibilities of maybe having too much power or a kind of extreme angle in the way that they use it or something like that. And so certainly for Sam Altman, he seems to be one of these guys who interfaces with that and is in
Yeah.
this unique and the reason and it explains why he would come into this position now rather than another time of his life, because this is when that natal Sun Pluto opposition is being sort of activated, that kindling is being given, by that Pluto ingress into Aquarius, completing that angular geometry between his natal Sun and Pluto. I'm sure you've seen that
Yeah.
all the time with different other planets.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the other thing about these two guys bears mentioning is Mark Zuckerberg is a Mars retrograde guy. Sam Altman is a Venus retrograde guy.
Hmm.
And then sort of reversed. Altman's got the Sun and Mars in the same sign. Zuckerberg's got the Sun and Venus in the same sign.
Nicely noted. Also, note that Mark Zuckerberg has Venus in the sign of its domicile and Mars in the sign of its domicile, but Sam Altman has
Has
Venus and
not
Mars in their opposite domiciles in equal
exactly.
reception with each other.
Yeah.
So, like I said, it would be interesting to see what these two people think of
how
each
things
other or how they'd
yeah,
interact.
how things merge, because this is going to be such a game changer. We're in like this we're in this moment now where, giants can be sort of overturned, you know.
Yeah.
New regimes coming up. I mean, look at what's happening, with media companies, Vice is going bankrupt, all these different sort of um, all the giants of the 2010s are sort of falling by the wayside, and it's a real new era in so many new ways. And yeah, look, Google doesn't feel safe because of AI, and Google seemed to be sort of like the foundation of the modern internet. So things can just go in such crazy directions now. It's
Yeah. I remember looking up on the ICANN website where you can look up when domain names were created. And so if you look up when the domain name for google.com was created, it comes out to this date in like September of 1997.
96, isn't it?
Or
96 or
I forget exactly what it is. I mean, I could find it again.
no, 98 is when the site went up. But yeah, they probably bought the you're probably
Um,
right. They bought the domain in 97.
so www.google.com. So
It's so
it
meta.
was created on September.
You're using Google to Google.
I'm using Google to I found the ICANN website, the ICANN. So it says that google.com was created on September 15th, 1997 at 4 p.m. UTC, but I don't know exactly where, that tells us the um probably the GMT time rather than the local time,
Right.
but it gives us an exact time that this was created. And so if you look at the general date, though, of September 15th, 1997, there are some really interesting features of that time that I think are kind of worth mentioning from an electional perspective. It's
Hmm.
especially interesting for the kind of site, for the kind of enterprise, really, that Google is, that is really, really clear. If you want to bring up
Yeah.
the transits for September 15th,
I'm
1997.
I'm on it now. Sorry, I'm not faster.
Oh, no, no worries.
All right. Well, I have a chart that for something that took place September 15th, 1997. It'll just have to be a stand-in chart for what you're talking about.
No worries.
It's a good pick. You'll find it amusing.
Okay.
Episode 13 of Buffy the Vampire Slayer was aired.
All right. So if you I think the thing that really tells us why this would be a time where something like Google would emerge, check out what Mercury is doing.
It's just
Mercury,
stationed direct in Virgo.
yeah, so we have Mercury in the sign of its exaltation and rulership, its highest, expression, with it having recently stationed direct, so resuming direct motion, making that powerful movement forward through the zodiac. Also having recently heliacally risen,
Yes.
um, and then Mercury also in that fairly close square with Pluto. So we have this extremely powerful Mercury
Mm,
basically at the time of this website is created, which, well, the domain rather, is created, which uh is basically the repository for the world's information,
yeah.
the largest digital library in the world. um the amount of information that Google has, really is astonishing, really is incredible. So the fact that this domain was created at a time when Mercury, the planet of language and communication, is at its sort of highest point of expression in Virgo, making this powerful phase relative to the sun and making that, stressful square, with Pluto, I think is such an apt um, demonstration of sort of that the power of those phases. It also shouldn't go unnoticed too that was after a solar eclipse in Virgo. There also, I think it was actually happening much closer to the actual days of the lunar eclipse in Pisces. Um, you sort of see that with other really major websites that they seem to emerge at these eclipses. This seem to be, kind of heralded by these eclipse events.
They know what they're doing somehow. You notice that with successful people is they just sort of seem to move through life as if they do have an astrologer guiding them, but they just sort of innately know the right time to do certain things.
Right. Which makes you wonder then, if you don't have the destiny, of an extraordinarily successful person, that
Why bother?
I mean, I guess just at least for the illusion that, you might be able to move the needle if it can be. What do you
Move that needle.
Yeah, I mean, it's your destiny to try if you use it.
Yeah, it's your destiny to live, to spend your time alive being alive. I'm a little more zen about it all.
What else was I gonna say about
What else were you going to say?
Google? I don't know. What do you want to say?
I've forgotten what to say as well. I'm reminded of September 97 is when I took my first astrology class in New York City. So that's what I think of when I see September of 1997.
So that means that Mercury retrograde in Virgo that would have happened over your Venus and Jupiter would have been
Yeah.
sort of activated. Yeah.
Yeah. I was in a class in New York City where we read charts, and I already sort of felt like I'd been reading a lot of astrology books for 2 years, and we started this class, and I thought it was a beginner's class, but I found myself I was already a little further ahead than I thought I'd been. So, yeah. Wonderful teacher I had, Shirley Sofer, who I think still teaches in New York City.
I think in September of 1997, well, I was just about to turn 10, and I had just started my last school year, which would take place in the UK, because that was the year before I moved to Germany. Of course, I had no idea that was going to happen until a few months later. About 3 months later, I'd find out that we were moving to Germany.
Oh, during the Venus retrograde of early 98?
That's right. Because I basically had 6 months warning,
Right.
that we were going to be living in a different country with a different language and would have to adapt, and we better do it now.
The same Venus retrograde that your son's born under.
That's correct.
16 years apart.
That's right. That's right.
Interesting.
And then but of probably, well, at least what stuck out more in my memory though was the Sun Venus conjunction that occurred very close to like 0 Scorpio, 29 Libra, that happened that October of 1998.
Yeah, the blue two conjunction.
Yeah, so I had my solar return at that time, October 23rd, and I'll never forget when I turned 11, because on that day, I was coming back from school. So I was living in Germany at this point, and they used the trams, to go to and from school.
Where in
And
Germany were you living again?
I was living in Darmstadt, which was central Germany, in the state of Hessen, kind of.
Yeah, it's near Frankfurt. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
right,
where
yeah,
it's where the real Frankenfurt
right.
Frankenstein castle is.
So I was coming back from school one day. It was on my birthday, and I was not very wise to the, I was a, fresh, brand new, really, still in the country and still, barely making it through each day. And, unfortunately kids, 11, 12, they can be monsters to each other. And so that was the day I was pantsed on the tram.
Oh.
Okay, but you have to understand the reason why
Oh.
why this stuck out more in my mind is because it was so humiliating, because like it was in a packed tram, and like there was this bend where the tram, everyone had to lean in the tram because it was going around this sort of tight corner, and I had
Right.
nothing really to hold on to. So I was like holding on to like this thing hanging from above, and I was hanging onto both hands. And while I had both hands up, some kid like pulled my pants down, and I was like falling over trying to pull my pants out, and I was like falling into these old people in front of me, and he were just going like, "Get it out!" You know, just and I was
Oh
like, kids just
no.
laughing, and I was just like couldn't get my pants off, and it was just like fucking terrible, and I was falling over everywhere, and so I just like got off the bus. I
What a
couldn't even handle that,
what a
and I
nightmare.
could barely face going back to school after that.
Oh
And eventually
god.
I did end up transferring actually pretty shortly after that because it just the bullying was bad, and but I'll remember that it was the Sun Venus conjunction
Yeah, here we
on
are.
my on my son. You know, you'd think, oh, that would be great. You know, but you know, you can also see it was squared by Neptune, squared by opposed by Saturn. It was a
Yeah.
very, very lonely time.
Yeah, no,
Uh
that Neptune and Saturn are both, doing the
um
number on you there.
you know, my only like escape from reality at that time was Pokemon. The Pokemon games. I
Oh,
was really
dude.
obsessed with playing Pokemon because I was able to kind of escape into the world of Pokemon, and didn't have to think about the fact that I was, you know, living this very
Oh, brutal.
tortured lifestyle at 11 years old. Well, you know, it just, you know, it really made me feel, it makes me feel, you know, for all the kids, you know, who in the United States, you know, who come from South America and who are adapting to the culture and the new language. And I know I don't want to pretend like I know exactly what that's like, but I have had a little experience of being in a foreign place, in a foreign culture, and not
Sure.
understanding the language and just trying to survive.
Yeah.
And
I
uh
I'm from
and
Montreal, so we're like your whole life is like that here.
Uh, so like,
Your entire
so
life is here in your hometown when
right. So it's really funny too, because that was so turning age 11, of course, that is a 12th house perfection year, which highlights the position of my natal moon, which
right.
was at 2 degrees Scorpio. And during that whole time frame, Saturn was opposing my moon.
Yeah,
And I definitely think back on that as, you know, the loneliest time of my life, you know, because it wasn't just the fact that I, you know, was in this unfamiliar place and just trying to survive, but you know, there were so many like family things kind of going on at the same time that
mm,
really were very distressing, and there wasn't it was a very, very bad time. And so it's that Saturn moon, that's, you know, Saturn hitting my moon, the ruler of the year, throughout that whole year. Things got a lot better the next year, because
mm,
I finally got a hang of the language. And that was also around the time that my Mercury was beginning to station direct my progression.
mm.
But yeah, I was able to finally get a handle on German, and that's how I was finally able to start building you know, a life there, you know, and getting beyond just surviving. But yeah, that 12th house year was real bad because of that Saturn opposition to my moon. And it's so funny because I often think of this when I'm thinking of the differences between different perfection years, because in when I was 23, I was again in a 12th house year, and this is in the same year I was just talking about with the Jupiter return. uh, Jupiter, when it ingressed into Taurus, opposed my moon. So in 1997, 1998, it was Saturn opposing my moon, the ruler of the year. But in 2011, it was Jupiter opposing my moon, the ruler of my year. And in that
Yeah,
time, I uh through a long story short, I was in a very strange situation when I moved from Massachusetts to Arizona, where I was in an extremely luxurious like mansion in Sedona, and I was like house sitting for this extremely wealthy family. I mean, I was also working on like the arranging and orchestrating this person's musicals, uh, and part of the deal was I got free room and board. at this absolutely gorgeous, like luxury villa, type
Nice.
place. And so it was just me and this dog, for several weeks, and it was very, very nice, but lonely, but it wasn't bad, So it's kind of the different, I feel like that illustrates the difference of 12th house perfection years. It really depends on, what planets
Yeah, yeah.
happen to the ruler
Yeah,
of the
yeah.
year.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's something to be said for the 12th house as long as you're not with that dog underneath some overpass in the rain, you know?
Right, yeah, Jupiter and Taurus made it much more luxurious, and so I'm going through the same thing now. I'm in a 12th house year again, and Jupiter is making this opposition to my moon, and it hasn't gone exact yet. But I guess it's kind of funny that I'm bringing up this story now, as we're sort of at the
Yep.
yeah, I guess sort of returning to that Jupiter story, I guess, in my own chronology.
Indeed, indeed. Yeah, Jupiter in Taurus, we had it in 99 2000. I remember the Jupiter Saturn conjunction of May of 2000. That was the time prior to 2011. So there also seems to be, I think, something relating to Putin's career that has to do with
Mm,
Jupiter and Taurus, because he came to power in August of 99 when Jupiter was in Taurus. And then Jupiter and Taurus of 2011, if I'm not mistaken, excuse me, is when he came back to power as president after being prime minister for a while under Medvedev. Do you remember?
right.
He was
Yeah.
president, then he wasn't, then he was again.
Hmm.
So yeah, to my mind, I think there's sort of a cycle of completion there, um, relating to Putin's life. On top of the fact that this Venus retrograde in Aries, in Leo rather, is always a big deal for him. As I was just telling a live stream audience the other day.
Right. Well, we talked about the Venus retrogrades in Leo and what that means for him, and
Hmm.
how
Yeah.
that's almost above all other things. Is such a
Yeah.
huge deal for him that it's going to be impossible to ignore that. And we also talked about whether or not the Venus Jupiter square is bad, and you seem to think it's like Venus versus Jupiter, so a kind of conflict
Yeah.
between those two things, as
Yeah,
opposed to
that's something that really does come up sometimes with the Venus Jupiter squares, having to choose between two outcomes, like a Sophie's choice type of situation where, like, you got to choose which kid to give to the gas chamber, and which they
oh, so like
whose
a
life to
choice
save.
between two good things
Yeah,
or two desired things.
exactly. Yeah.
Hmm. I had never really thought of it like that. I I don't know that I mean I still I guess I don't you'd think after studying astrology for 20 years that I'd have more of a clearer idea about this, but
Something you always
um
there's always some new thing to learn. Yeah, no, look into it. Just, take them at you don't need to buy it, you don't need to accept it. Just, look into it in your own time, and, when it comes up.
yeah, I guess so you don't even maybe give that much weight to the fact that there's a bit of reception between Venus and Jupiter in
Oh,
that
oh,
particular those particular signs.
I mean, reception will mitigate things, obviously. So I wasn't. Were we thinking
Mhm.
about a specific case where there was
Oh, like,
a
well,
reception?
Jupiter and Taurus square Venus and Leo.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. No, no, that obviously does something.
But what?
That-
I mean, it takes the edge off, I would think. I mean, it would show that there's
well, it
there's
can make it in
more
in
of a
certain
connection between
circumstances.
the two
In
possibilities rather
certain
than none.
in certain circumstances, what it'll do is it'll make it sort of more cooperative.
Okay.
Um, but you can still have a situation where there's, like, tough choices to be made. More than one desired thing, and one desired thing must be sacrificed in order to maintain or achieve another.
Hmm. And what do you think of, in practice, do you kind of make a distinction between like superior versus inferior squares? Do you consider
You know, I always feel like
spelling?
I always feel like you should be paying attention to that, but I find when I do, I really can't tell the difference between them. You know, like there's not one that's more, this and the
Mhm.
other is more that. So while in theory, I think you would want to, I've never really been able to discern a distinction between, the direct station or
Or
the
even versus
opposition.
an opening square versus a closing square?
Yeah, I mean, the opening versus closing squares, I think you'll just like the way that'll play out is when transits come to make a transit to that aspect. Let's say Saturn's going to be opposite one and square the other. It'll change what order the transits are made in, if you catch my drift.
Mhm. Uh, we have a guest here who is commenting.
Oh.
Might be someone we know. I don't know. They're called the Astrology Podcast. Who do you think that is? They're saying any thoughts on the astrology of June. Getting to ready to record our forecast today in about an hour.
Oh, I
Hmm.
think what this person.
What a
Yeah,
troll!
yeah, seriously. This person this per
Ban him.
this person should watch Chris Brennan's show because he really gives a very good
Oh,
forecast
true.
of. Yeah, yeah.
Yes. No. Because Chris Brennan always has good forecasts, so
Yeah, yeah.
you should
So
totally
that yeah, yeah.
watch him
So
for some
that's what you
tips.
should do there, listener, is tune into Chris
Yeah.
Brennan's astrology podcast.
Well, what do you think? Maybe we could tell him. Long time listener, first time caller. Yeah.
Sure.
Well, let's see. June. Sure. Yeah. Let's see. June. Um, what's going on in June? Do you want to bring it up?
June.
The transits.
The moon in June falls mainly on the spoon. All right.
But we get Venus ingressing into Leo, and so it doesn't get it starts gets into that pre-retrograde shadow
Yeah.
period around. What degree does Venus station direct at this time?
12 degrees.
12?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that means June 19th it'll enter into that. Now, what do you make of the fact that Venus will be conjunct Mars, but without actually completing the conjunction?
Yeah, that's wild. It did that also in early 2022. I don't know if you remember.
Right. Hmm.
There were some
It
conjunctions,
was
and
so
then there was like
close.
this chasing it. Um, yeah,
Yeah, because for example, in the context of like a horror, if you had two significators that were in that situation where it looks like they're going to make a conjunction, but they don't actually complete that conjunction by degree and minute, doesn't actually perfect, then it would reflect a situation where you have sort of the appearance of that conjunction happening, but it doesn't actually go through. So it'd almost be like, the worst fears sort of look like they're kind of in play, but it doesn't quite go all the way through. So, for example, maybe people will be maybe, for example, if it represented something about the debt ceiling debate, there would be this really
yeah.
pronounced fear that it would go through, but like it just wouldn't quite materialize the way it looks like it might go.
The way I saw the one in early March was there was just this expectation at that point that Russia was going to march into Ukraine and take it really quickly, and that would be that.
But it didn't
And
work.
that was, so it's that element of like, oh well, we all know what's going to happen next, and everyone's really sure they know what's going to happen next, and then what's supposed to happen next doesn't happen next.
Right. So that looks like that closest approach. Well, it'd be hard to tell exactly what the closest approach is, just sort of eyeballing it. But um, I guess another thing to mention is the fact that Venus and Mars will also be making this square to Uranus
Yeah,
in late June.
going into July
So
here. Yeah,
I guess on a broader mundane level, um, we're we're looking at that potential for um, I would think
Well,
probably like
it
protests or something like that.
exactly. It reminds me of 1991. Um, 1991, because of course, every 32 years, the Venus and Mars will come up together. They'll
Hmm.
make joint returns. So if we look, like, this is August 1st, 91. Um, this was the Venus retrograde station in Virgo, and you can see it's with
Hmm.
Mars. But if we go back like 2 months, that's just a month here, and back another week. Yeah, they did make a conjunction this time around, but but
Hmm.
it's like the repeat of what was going on this time in 91. And yeah, 91 was, this was like the whole trial of the policeman for the Rodney King beating. I mean, the verdict wouldn't be until the following April when the riots happened, but this was like a sort of a hot time for that. Um,
Well, yeah, I'm also thinking because Leo is the seat of the sun, it's the throne. Mars coming upon Leo then would be like problems for people in leadership positions, problems for the king
yeah,
or
yeah.
leaders.
And
And
that was the case in the summer of 91. Two of the biggest stories. One was the attempted Soviet coup against Gorbachev, like an attempted coup to
Mhm,
overthrow him and reinstall this sort of hardline Soviet position. And that wasn't, that didn't sort of follow through. And then
right.
there was this big riot in New York City. I think a rabbi's chauffeur struck and killed a young black kid, and there was like
Mhm,
this sort of rising racial tension between, in Brooklyn, between black and Jewish communities
right.
over that, and some
Right.
uproars and
I
stuff.
I would think because Venus is stationing retrograde. I don't think it actually stations retrograde in June, but as it's slowing down into that conjunction with Mars, I might think there might be more high profile stories surrounding potentially like sexual abuse allegations or misdeeds of a social or sexual nature of that kind of dimension, sexual crimes sort of coming to the fore, and especially in a very explosive
Yeah.
way because of the square to Uranus. So
That was the other
uh
thing. The other thing about 91, July of 91. This seems so small potatoes now, but it's quite the Venus going retrograde with Mars.
mhm,
Demi Moore posed on the cover of Vanity Fair, naked and pregnant. Like, she was sort of,
mhm,
covering herself, but was,
right.
and it was like this big
I
deal.
know the picture
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of iconic now, but it was like this big deal. It's the
Yeah.
kind of thing that's been repeated. But that's sort of your classic Venus retrograde type of thing, something that's provocative and that, uh, uh,
s-
you know,
Boundary
boundary
pushing in
pushing.
some way.
Exactly. Yeah, setting
Yeah.
some kind of new standard or pushing the goalpost in some direction.
Right. So I would think um uh yeah, the square to Uranus would make that sort of somehow especially kind of explosive. So maybe actors or actresses I mean on the worst end this could be, I don't know, like leaks of, um
You know, w-
sensitive photographs or something
well,
like
this
that.
whole thing with Diane Weinstein sort of being too old to serve on her, uh, Feinstein, not Weinstein, Diane
Right.
Feinstein, being too old to serve on her committees, and this is holding back the function of government. Uranus can sometimes come into play in sort of generational divides. And, you're kind of seeing this, like Nancy Pelosi saying, "Oh, if you're criticizing Dianne Feinstein, you're ageist, or you're sexist, or
Sexist.
these things are coming up." And then other people are like, "Look, it's just, we need someone to be doing this job, and she's way too old." And so, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. I think that's also something that's sort of emerging is this sort of these factions within the political parties themselves, where it's not so much Republicans against Democrats, but two factions of Republicans against each other, or two factions of Democrats each other, like for instance with this whole Feinstein thing.
So another kind of important thing that occurs in June is on June 11th, Pluto will regress
Back into
back
Capricorn.
into
Yeah.
Capricorn. And so it, it feels like such a step backward, but because that Pluto, I feel like we were kind of all I feel like we're ready to kind of keep going with Pluto and Aquarius, but the regress of Pluto back into Capricorn seems to suggest actually we still have just a little bit left to do. And of course, when Pluto ingressed into Capricorn in 2008, we had the collapse of the financial system. We're sort of facing that potentially again. It'd be really funny if we had another sort of really substantial shock to the financial system in June with Pluto's regress back into that sign. It's not something I would say too lightly. There are other factors I'm taking into consideration here. The fact that we're experiencing the same set of eclipses, Saras wise, as we did back in 1987, which was that was the lead up to a major crash in that October. So I think that June could be significant for somehow re-encountering these sort of Pluto and Capricorn themes of too big to fail and all of that sort of stuff. Maybe that's too broad a brush.
Yeah, I'm still sort of reminded of the Occupy days. There is a strike going
Mm.
on. Other sort of, the whole AI phenomenon. I mean, it's going to be closing off a number of jobs that people thought they would have forever.
Mhm.
And yeah, I imagine June is the beginning of a long sort of a long hot summer of people taking to the streets.
Now, what do you make of on June 17th? There'll be this new moon at 26 degrees of Gemini,
Mm,
which will be a very closely square Neptune at 27 Pisces. Um, so it looks like a very Neptune-y
yeah,
new moon in Gemini.
right, right. That new moon reminds me of Watergate, because that was the date of Watergate and the sun degree of Watergate.
What about other new moons? Well, I guess we'd probably have to consider, like in previous years, the new moons in Gemini were roughly all uh, in that sort of square to Neptune. Some would have been closer than others. For example, back in 2021, you had a new moon occur. Actually, it was a solar eclipse, June 9th, which would have been pretty closely square Neptune in Pisces. Um, these, I feel like I mean, I know I've been called like the meme prophet. I don't have like a perfect track record, but I often find that these lunar transits, they sometimes tell us about the quality of the kinds of things that get passed around the internet, the sort of the memes for the month. And so the fact that we are going to have this new moon square Neptune, I would wonder if there would be some trend that emerges then in June, which sort of has to do with um, surreal depictions of some kind of surreal
Well, I mean,
depiction of
yeah,
reality.
yeah,
Like,
like what? You mean like something Midjourney might make?
oh, sure, but yeah. So, well, I guess yeah, the sort of ongoing
Yeah.
people posting sort of mid-journey AI derived stuff, but um, it would be maybe more sort of specific, I guess, than that. Something that relates to maybe, I don't know, a kind of, I would think maybe an abstract or surrealist type of joke, right? Because it's Gemini square Neptune and Pisces, kind of nonsense,
Or
sort of.
like a literal like Midjourney meme, like some Midjourney image becomes a meme.
Right. I guess I don't know how impressive a prediction it would be because I guess that's sort of more or less
More or
guaranteed,
less guaranteed.
to happen.
Yeah.
But I would wonder if there's something more specific around that time because I've just been struck by how what the moon is doing seems to capture the quality of the memes that are being discussed, and so that's why I've been sort of paying more attention to that.
Oh,
Some of these things can even just happen just for like a day or so,
sure.
where something is sort of trending.
Well, let's see here. I'm going to treat the audience to a little screen share of my database. So I'm just going to do a general search for Sun conjunct Moon and Sun square Neptune and see what sort of events I get.
Harry Houdini escapes mirror handcuffs.
Yeah, there you go.
I see. That's kind of like an illusion,
Yeah.
a doubling illusion, because through the use of a mirror, something that's sort of, I mean, it might even be something not as harmless as memes, but maybe even something like a virus,
Right. So
a
there was a sun moon
computer virus or
sun
something.
moon conjunction in Gemini square Neptune in 2012. Of the season
That was an eclipse.
an eclipse. The season finale of The Celebrity Apprentice, season 12. Yeah, I've been looking at those silly Celebrity Apprentice charts to get a handle
So it
on
was all
Mr. Trump.
fake.
Yeah, right.
It was all fake. Okay.
Fake
Fake
reality
news.
show.
Yeah, it just seems to elevate this whole prospect of the unreal.
Sigmund Freud founds the Psychological Society. Well, that's a pretty good one.
Interesting.
Yeah. So there's indeed Harry Houdini.
Sleight of hand, and a magic trick that people, that kids on TikTok are trying to do. That,
Sure. Yeah.
That's the kind of thing I was sort of thinking of when I see like a Moon Neptune type arrangement like we have at that new moon.
Right. This is a good one. The Anglo-Zulu Battle of Isandlwana, where Zulus with spears literally defeated, gun-carrying British soldiers. Quite the reversal there.
Wow. And again, a solar eclipse.
Yeah. Yeah. Very, very famous, very famous battle. Yeah, there's a number of things here. Prison riot, Salvador Dali on the cover of Time magazine. There you go. Surrealistic indeed.
Oh yes, surrealism.
That's also an eclipse, a solar eclipse, square Neptune.
Right.
Really interesting, the things that just sort of come up.
Yeah, since it's in the sign of Gemini, that which has to do with speech or voice, I wonder if there's just maybe there's like another like AI single, right, that drops from a famous artist. Of course, it's already happened, but I would wonder, if that's one of the sort of possibilities.
James Brown recorded "Papa's Got a Brand New Bag" when there was a new moon square Neptune. And the Doors got their record contract when there was a new moon square Neptune. So yeah, lot of very interesting stuff here.
So I guess that's what we'll have to. That's what I would sort of expect for that.
Then one last one. Squeaky Frum tried to kill Gerald Ford. Squeaky Frum was one of the Manson family, and she tried to shoot Gerald Ford during a Venus retrograde in Leo, during a month when she wasn't even the only woman who tried to shoot Gerald Ford that month. September of 1975, during that Venus retrograde, 2 different women tried to shoot Gerald Ford in totally unrelated.
Well, actually, that might be relevant though. Like Venus conjunct Mars, with Venus slowing down towards like what if there's like, sort of maybe like more notable events of sort of attempted violence from people that you maybe wouldn't necessarily expect it from, right? Because don't Venus retrogrades often present figures and situations of people who transcend social boundaries or social expectations, and so sometimes you can see that in a very positive way where people are stepping out of line, for an important reason. But that can also be more colorful and more interesting ways that that can come out where people actually are maybe committing like crimes or
Yeah,
doing
look,
something that's
I mean,
completely out of character.
Kristallnacht was Venus retrograde, you know.
Right.
The sort of the Iranian Revolution was Venus retrograde, you know, where suddenly women had to, you know, were being forced to wear burqas as opposed to throwing them off. So it can also be, you know, it can be revolutionary, but also sort of counter-revolutionary.
Hmm.
It's mainly, I think, about what, you know, things changing from one set of standards to another set of standards, be they regardless if the standards are more progressive or less than what
Right.
existed.
Right. Now, another thing that occurs in June, but 2 weeks before that new moon, we get the full moon at at 13 degrees of Gemini on June 3rd, and that is somewhat square Saturn in Pisces. So a full moon square Saturn
Okay,
um
let's try that one.
on June 3rd. I guess from a theoretical standpoint. Oh, our resident troll, the astrology podcast
Yeah.
says, "Thanks, guys. You've made my procrastinating by watching a live stream slightly more productive when I'm supposed to be preparing for my own. I'm off to record. Keep up the good work." Well, thank you very
And
much.
keep up not keeping up the good work, or I don't even know
Yeah,
how do
yeah,
we reward him for shirking off on his job? You know, Chris, the community is depending on you. You shouldn't be shirking off watching the show, and
yeah.
you have
uh,
responsibilities, young man. Goofing off watching
yeah. Well,
podcasts
I
when you're
wish him
supposed to
good.
be
I
working.
wish him good luck. You know, maybe,
That's right.
hopefully, some people will watch his podcast someday.
Yeah, I know.
You know, he can have
He's struggling.
as much success as we
Yeah, yeah,
are.
he's struggling for the views, that guy. So throw him a bone. Um, yeah. So I'm looking at full moon square Saturn now.
um, right. Full moon square Saturn.
Prince George, who is now, I guess, second in line for the throne. Not King George, Prince George. Let's see here. Planet Hollywood grand opening in 1991. That's funny. That was such a big deal.
And is now such a
Not a big deal.
degraded
Yeah.
brand. Yeah, I mean, in general, when I think of full moons, I think of emotional heights when things sort of reach maybe a fever pitch. And square Saturn obviously has those connotations of more somber or serious feelings. So I would think there might be a sort of somber mood
Right.
of that day. So it could maybe revolve around, maybe there'll be like more posts that you see on social media that revolve around sort of maybe memories of someone who's passed. Maybe there's kind of collective mourning of someone, or something along those lines.
Yeah. Yeah. I think of it as some kind of like, you know, mitigated action. You know, like some sort of attempt to do something that's largely successful, but with some sort of mitigating circumstance to it, if you catch my drift.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I am sharing my screen here, so we're looking through different events here. Yeah, this is a good one. The Vanderbilt custody verdict. This poor girl who, this is Gloria Vanderbilt. This is Anderson Cooper's mom, but when she was a little girl. And she was part of this crazy sort of custody verdict where she was a big sort of news figure. And yeah, it's it's a very long, convoluted story, but you can see the moon was coming out of a full moon and they were square Saturn, although it's a bit wide. What else do I have? Oh, this is a good one. Bayard Rustin, who this is a really important civil rights activist,
Right.
long before Rosa Parks would be arrested for refusing to sit in the back of the bus. Bayard Rustin would also be arrested for refusing to sit in the back of a bus in 1947. Rosa Parks paid a fine. Bayard Rustin actually had to go on a chain gang, I think, for at least a month or something like that for his infraction. This is an earlier arrest he had. He objected to, being called up to fight the war, and so he was jailed for being a war objector. So yeah, you've got the full moon square Saturn there with Mars. What else do we have?
Wow. That's actually really funny you mentioned that, because I think Elizabeth Holmes,
Yeah.
the founder of that Theranos company, which was not real. She has to report to prison, I think, fairly soon. I would wonder if it happens close to the date of that full moon.
Yeah, that's an interesting.
I mean, of course, this. I mean, just the idea. I mean, not comparing Rustin to Holmes, but
no, but I hear you.
But just the idea of like the stories of Saturn being maybe more pronounced,
right,
at that full moon.
Right.
And someone facing the consequences and the responsibilities of what they've done, or facing the blowback or the realities.
I'm seeing 3 famous meetings with a full moon square Saturn. Number 1 is Sylvia Plath meeting Ted Hughes. This is a meeting of 2 poets. It's a full moon square Saturn. I believe they met at a party in England when they were at Cambridge. And
so Saturn's the tied up a lip.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, this is sort of a fated and ill-fated union between 2 great poets. There's Elvis Presley meeting Colonel Tom Parker, his future manager, who will kind of like run Elvis's life in kind of weird directions. But this is a full moon square Saturn. These are meetings with
the Beatles meet Ringo Starr.
That's the other one I'm coming to. Yeah, the Beatles met Ringo Starr in Hamburg when there was a full moon square Saturn. These are all relationships that have just like like they were really meant to happen, and these people are going to make history together. Obviously, Ringo joining the Beatles, there's nothing but good about that. That had to happen, and that's a really important meeting. He's like the last piece of that puzzle. Elvis and Tom Parker, it's more of a mixed bag. I don't know if Elvis would have wound up being as big, like for as long a star as he was without Tom Parker, but still, I think Parker didn't really have Elvis's, best circumstances in mind. And then, Sylvia Plath and Ted Hughes. Well, I mean, Sylvia Plath wound up taking her own life, in part because of being
I'm noticing a few suicides along your list here. So
yeah, and it's not like I just study suicides or anything. What else?
No.
Are you seeing here?
But I think it's relevant because one of the things I had one of the things I think you could maybe expect from a full moon square Saturn is the illumination of these kinds of more maybe tragic sort of stories. Like I said, a public mourning almost. And certainly
right. There's
that kind of event could qualify.
Right. There's this attempted suicide. This is Allen Ginsberg's mother attempting suicide. She would succeed like 20 years later, 19 years later. During a different Venus retrograde than this transit, but that is an attempted suicide there. Which other attempted suicide?
So if you're watching this, just know
life is precious.
Yeah, and hold on, these lunar transits pass, so if it's a hard time for you, please try to hold on.
Yeah.
The next
the
next good thing, which always comes around.
There comes up that good old April 8th, 2024 eclipse. No, we haven't gone over it. I did look for the asteroid, or the comet, rather, I should say, that's supposed to be flying by around the time of that eclipse. But my astronomy software doesn't have it. It must be a fairly newly discovered body, but I don't really have much to say about the comet. And the eclipse, it seems a bit soon to be talking about that eclipse, or is that what people really want to?
I mean, yeah, I haven't quite looked at it, so I'm gonna need to actually briefly take a look at it. So looking at this April 8th solar, the total solar eclipse 2024 has at 19 Aries, the degree of the exaltation degree of the sun. Technically, it's 1 degree off because it's technically 18 degrees Aries. The 19th degree is 18 degrees,
Yeah.
but let's see. So it's at 19. It's conjunct Mercury retrograde, which is fairly common for eclipses because of Mercury's proximity. Venus looks like it would be poking out of the glare of the sun there. Happens at the same time as a Mars-Saturn conjunction in Pisces. Right around the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction as well. I mean, yeah, I think with this last solar eclipse we just saw in Aries, we saw two major media figures, get the kibosh. They,
Mhm.
uh, you know, uh,
Yeah, lose their jobs.
and yeah, they lost the jobs. In fact, on the day of the eclipse itself, that's when Fox basically gave up.
Right,
They settled with Dominion
right.
to avoid a protracted trial. It's kind of hilarious it didn't happen earlier,
And
but
and then they got rid of Tucky.
yeah,
Tucky and Donnie. Tucky and Donnie
God,
lost their jobs.
uh, Jesus. Um, yeah, I've been looking ahead. Well, really since like 2007 or so, 2008, I've been looking ahead to the Saturn return of Fox News. So that's when Saturn reaches Aries, which should be kind of interesting. But I've been reading recently that like Fox has had to like get rid of tons of their journalists because of the huge amount of money that they had to pay out.
Yeah.
So they've had to really cut back on everything. And so I would wonder if the continuation of those eclipses in Aries will be like kind of further downfalls of prominent media figures and prominent challenges to Fox News, which has their natal Saturn in Aries.
Yeah, and
I don't know if you happen to have the chart of that first
I
broadcast.
I don't. What I was gonna say though is, Fox isn't having as easy a time of bouncing back. Their ratings have been crap since they fired Tucker.
Yeah.
Usually
Well,
usually they get
yeah,
rid of these high profile people and they can still move on, you know?
it's hilarious. I can't deny a little bit of Schadenfreude about all this, but at the same time, I think what's also I guess no, I shouldn't. I'm not really contrasting those statements. I actually am just kind of continuing on with it. What I was just gonna say is that uh, they try to posit themselves as sort of like the alternative to mainstream news. But if you're actually looking at the number of people who watch cable news, they are the top network. They're the
Oh, they
most
have been they
watched
have been
network.
they have been
They have it on
forever.
the
Yeah,
bag.
yeah.
They're acting like they're like this insurgent force, and it's like no, you are the mainstream
Yeah,
news
and
basically on cable. You
it
know,
was always a
uh,
BS pose, but it's never
you're
been
right.
more BS than now. I mean,
So I think that's relevant though because Aries is the exaltation of the sun. That it takes the person in the top spot out, uh, right? Because it's the sun which is being eclipsed, and that's what happened at the eclipse in Aries. Was Fox, the most watched news station, has wipes out in this fight with Dominion, and they lose. They get rid of their top guy, and suffer further fallout from that. And so I would think that in some ways, hopefully, it can sort of continues. But I wouldn't expect sort of the full hammer to drop in some respect, at least until they get to Saturn returning to its natal position in Aries. And I guess we'll have to see what happens with that. So I'm not saying that's the only significance that eclipse could have, but in context of our first taste of eclipses in Aries, I would think that we'd be able to forecast more problems for Fox with the April 2024 eclipse.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. It seems a bit far off.
Right.
Fortuna Move says Chiron being at 19 degrees of Aries at the same time, so that's an
Oh,
eclipse with an eclipse with Chiron as well. So yeah, I get.
oh, I didn't work with Chiron, so I didn't see
Yeah,
that.
I use it sometimes to research, but I don't look at it in day-to-day charts really.
Yeah, I didn't look at day-to-day charts, but I do think it's interesting that Michael Cohen turned himself in at his Chiron return. Um, because that is kind of
Yeah, he's a
an
Chiron figure. Yeah,
interesting
yeah. Good point.
yeah, that is an interesting demonstration of what people say Chiron is about. So, I heard that example and I was like, okay, that's actually pretty
Yeah.
interesting, but I haven't really followed through or gone further. Unfortunately, it's just I have a lot of things to balance. I have like kind of the daily focus I have to have for my clients, and then I also have the household and the kids
Yep.
and
Yeah.
and all of that, and
We're both
and then there's less time for research and writing and video
we're
making.
we're we're both working astrologers. We're both dads, and there's only so much time we can devote to these things. But yeah, I personally I've been on a research tear this past week, but it's certainly not
Nice.
something I always have time for. I'm about winding down. How are you feeling?
I'm I'm feeling okay, but I'm happy to bring this to
Okay.
a close for
Yeah.
we can look ahead next time.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm happy.
I think we did well.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
did well.
yeah. It's getting smoother. It's getting smoother. I finally figured out how to get rid of those unicorns and hearts. Um, I had some help on that. Our usual good luck fairy helped me sort of navigate my way through that. But that's what one.
Oh, was that
Yeah, it was
Kai?
Kai. Yes, yes.
That was Kai. Thank you very much.
Anytime anything winds up working out properly here, you can be pretty sure it's going to be Kai
Yeah,
and
thank you,
not
Kai.
me.
Kai is our official,
Stream helper,
guardian angel.
guardian angel of streaming. So yes, thank you, Kai, for that. And yeah, next Sunday, Watson, we'll be back here to. Um, oh, okay. Hi, Danny. Yeah, we'll be here next Sunday to have another chat to
Yeah.
talk about whatever sort
All
of
right.
comes up. And everyone have yourselves a fantastic week. Let's finish with our plugs. I will be live streaming again solo tomorrow and Friday at the same channel, again about 1 o'clock Eastern time. I'm available at nickdaganbestastrologer.com for consultations. So come check me out there. And yeah, check me out on YouTube. I've got some astrology videos up there and working on more as we speak. And yourself, Watson.
And you can find me and all my services at patrickwatsonAstrology.com. You can find me on Twitter while it's still around at pwatsonastro. And I am pwatsonastro on most other platforms. I actually just signed up on Blue Sky, which is what I hope will be the main alternative to Twitter. So you can find me at Blue Sky at pwatsonastro.bsky.social. If you're on Blue Sky, that's where I'll be.
Blue Sky. I haven't heard of it.
Maybe you will in a couple. Maybe you'll be the first recipient of
Yeah,
my
yeah. I'll have to look into.
my
Oh,
invitation code. Who
okay. Yeah,
knows?
yeah. That'd be good. I'm on Mastodon, but I haven't done much with it. All right, everyone. Have yourselves a fantastic Sunday. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you, Watson, as always, my lovely compatriot, and and
My lovely
my,
assistant.
I
Yeah,
think calling you
your
calling
co-pilot.
you
How
my
about that?
assistant would be too
Yeah,
patronizing. But
yeah. Co-pilot. I'm good with
all
that.
right, cool.
That's
All right,
that's good.
co-pilot.
All right.
Have yourself a good one. Cheers.
You too.